There are cobwebs in the back of my broken coat hanger room. I haven't cleaned it in months. No point, it's just for broken coat hangers. There is an old, frail spider whose many eyes glisten at me in the early morning light, as if begging for nutrition. Sorry, old girl, no flies down here, I'm afraid. Boiler's bust. Cold mist protrudes from my lips. I check my pocket watch. Soon, Mr. Parsons will arrive, as he always does, right on schedule. I tighten my cravat and prepare myself for the first performance of the morning. I look back up at the cobwebs, but the spider has disappeared. No longer in her transparent nest, it seemed the icy temperature had become too much to bear, as she now made her new home on the cold concrete floor, curled up into a tight, spindly fist, unmoving, her many eyes now closed. Guess I can put the bug spray away, I thought as I made my way to the storefront to greet the ever-predictable Mr. Parsons.
Hello.
I service Mr. Parsons every day. I spend 3 hours measuring his inseam, outer seam, neck seam, shoulder seam, arm seam, and outer arm seam. His measurements are always the same, but without this little ritual, my day would be completely devoid of human interaction. After the measurements are taken, he chooses the most elegant, expensive tux in the shop, puts it on and strides around in it for an hour. As usual, he tells me how much of an important man he is, and how he needs to look good for his big day. Mr. Parsons then removes the suit, politely returns it to me, and says he needs another day to mull it over. Mr. Parsons leaves, leaving me alone, isolated until closing time. This is where the real work began, trying to occupy the many empty hours with dull tasks. My dicky bows are damp, my top hats are dusty, my cufflinks are rusty, and I still haven't cleared out the broken coat hangers from my broken coat hanger room. And that's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Someone at the door. Perhaps Mr. Parsons had decided to buy that suit after all. Finally, I could have more tuppence to add to the boiler fund. But it wasn't Mr. Parsons at all. It was a tall, dark man that haunched over me like a street lamp. His skin was loose as if it was made for a skull 3 times larger and had an almost translucent quality. You could see his thin veins punt blue and red blood gently through his face. His eyes were hollow black discs that hauntingly approached me with a distant curiosity. He smiled gently, revealing a mouth with no teeth. With his out-breath, the storefront became filled with the invasive stench of bleach. My heart sank. I knew immediately none of my suits were large enough to fit this man. Maybe a tie at best, but I definitely couldn't suit him. He handed me a business card and smoothly moved his way into the shop, browsing the suits. "So, what can I do to help you with today, Mr.?" I looked down at the card. "Death?"
"It's pronounced Dee-ahth,"
he said, with his gaze fixed on the cold, tattered suits. He gently held the velvet lime sleeve of one of the older suit jackets. "Does that jacket interest you? It's
Edwardian, I know. The man who last wore it died in it. Charles Purview, a respected businessman and town dandy. He lived a life of debauchery and hedonism, attending many soirees and indulging in the sweet plum of life with his 2 closest friends, Barnaby McCoy and Roger Dillenby. After enjoying his fruitful youth, he settled down with the love of his life, Judith. They had 2 daughters, who were the apple of his eye. He lived the comfortable life of a loving father and faithful husband all the way up until his death on the day of his first daughter's wedding, where he suffered from a heart attack as a result of one too many cocktail sausages. As his daughter placed the ring on her finger, he collapsed into the middle of the aisle, shrieking and defecating in front of the entire congregation."
Mr. Dee-ahth smiled at the old suit jacket.
"When I came to collect his soul, he observed the chaos around him and made a joke about his circumstance, something about going out with a bang. I'm glad the jacket survived the whole ordeal. Not quite my colour, but a fine cut nonetheless. But I haven't come here to discuss attire. Like that wedding day, I've come here to claim a soul."
My entire body had been shaking. Is this the moment? Had my candlestick finally run out of wax? Will this stump which held a feeble flame be finally blown out? The black eyes of the ghoul stared through me. I felt a wave of relief. I thought of the incoming prospect of a life beyond ties and top hats. I looked back at Mr. Dee-ahth with an expression that I thought projected nobility. I'm ready.
Not you. The spider.
Oh. Mr. Dee-ahth went to the back of the broken coat hanger room, collected his soul and promptly left without so much as a glance behind him. In the ensuing years, I often wondered when my time would come. How would it come? I continued to run the shop the same as I always had. I cleared out the broken coat hanger room only for it to once again fill up with more broken coat hangers. I ran out of coat hangers and many of the suits now sagged on the floor, collecting dust. Eventually, Mr. Parsons stopped visiting. Eventually, light stopped coming in through the shop windows. Eventually, I stopped closing the store at all. In all the time I spent alone, I often wondered what story I would leave behind when death came to collect me. But Mr. Dee-ahth never came. By the year 125, I stopped keeping count. Death had forgotten about me. I stayed at the Tux Shop, wondering what story I would leave behind when death came to collect me, to take me to the new life. What stories would he tell of me to nurture a new soul into the unknown void? I imagined he would say, Colin Pimlico owned a Tux Shop. He worked in the Tux Shop his whole life. Colin Pimlico owned a Tux Shop.